same thing happened in the creation of the Catholic Chautauqua. There were two guys, Father James Laughlin, who was president of the National Union of Young Catholic Men's Associations. The National Union of Young Men's Catholic Associations, for short, the NUYMCA. I thought that was kind of clever. The NUYMCA. Easy to remember and very friendly. And Warren Mosher was the layperson, and he was the editor of the Catholic Reading Circle Review, which is usually called the Catholic Review. And I get the idea that the two of these guys kind of hung out together, and they would talk about the influence of the Methodist Chautauqua, and they were concerned about that. And I think they kind of hatched up a little bit of a plan, because it looks spontaneous. Laughlin writes a letter to the Catholic Review about establishing a Catholic Chautauqua, and of course Mosher, his friend, prints it. So it looks kind of random. It looks like we've got this kind of spontaneous suggestion by a Catholic priest to the Catholic Review, but I think they kind of cooked it up between themselves. Nevertheless, it worked pretty well, because what Laughlin suggested was that they have a session at the next conference of the NUYMCA and talk about establishing a Catholic Chautauqua. Well, and this is in 1892. This is like in January of 1892. By May of 1892, they've already got a steering committee set up of influential Catholics, and they already come up with a plan for the Chautauqua. Their plan included the curriculum, it included the faculty, it included the books that would be read, and very, very closely mirrored the blueprint that was set down by the Methodist Chautauqua. So there's really no doubt at all that the Catholic Chautauqua was created to mirror the Methodist Chautauqua. The school actually opened up in 1892. It was in New London, Connecticut at the time, and it was extremely successful. They had, we're not really quite sure how many enrollees they had, because the local press said about 300 to 600, and the Catholic Review says about 800 to 1,000. So I'm probably, the Catholic Review may have been, I don't know, a little bit prejudiced in their numbering. They may have counted people 2 or 3 times. I don't know, like they do in Chicago when you vote. So we're not really sure, but at any rate, it was enough of a success that they decided, okay, now that we've got this interest, now that we've got these people that have come to it and come again, let's find a permanent place, and let's establish a permanent place. And again, it wasn't very long. In fact, the very next year, they had a permanent place, 1893, and it was on Lake Champlain, and it was in a town called Cliff Haven. Now, when I first started to read about the Catholic Chautauqua, they talk about Cliff Haven and they talk about Plattsburgh. And they talk about Cliff Haven and Plattsburgh as if it's 2 different places. And it seems like 2 different places. And I couldn't find out, what are they talking about? Cliff Haven, Plattsburgh. Well, I found out that Cliff Haven is something, it's in New York. There's something in New York called a minor civic division, an MCD. So apparently, Cliff Haven is a minor civic division of Plattsburgh. So what it comes down to, I think, is just it's a neighborhood. It's a neighborhood in Plattsburgh, which was at that time abandoned. There were no people there, very few people. They targeted this because the land was donated to them. It was donated to them by a railroad, the Delaware and Hudson Railroad. It was a 450-acre farm that was no longer in use. Right on Lake Champlain, 3/4 of a mile lakefront property. And this was real lakefront property. It wasn't lakefront property like in Lakeside, where lakefront, it was all the way back to 5th Street. It was real on the lake. They had a golf course behind it, or at least the early beginnings of a golf course. A hotel was located right next to it. There was a steel pier there where steamboats could come in. And it was also supported by the town of Plattsburgh. The town of Plattsburgh said, you want to build your Chautauqua here? That's great, terrific. There are no buildings there? Tell you what, use our high school. Use our normal school. Tell you what, you can use our theater too. So the first year that they were in Cliff Haven, they had all these buildings already established for them. There was also a stone quarry right by for the access to stones to build buildings in Cliff Haven. And the New York State also cooperated very much. By the very next year, they already were a chartered school. They had an official charter from the state of New York. So all these things came together fortuitously, maybe, I'm not sure. It may have been some part of a larger plan, but it seems to have worked pretty well. The second thing that happened that was very fortuitous was that they appointed a new president, the first president of the Catholic Chautauqua, a guy by the name of Reverend Thomas Connedy. He was appointed by the Board of Trustees, the school's first president. And this guy apparently was a real dynamo. He was really dynamic. He was charismatic. He was forward-looking. He had all sorts of plans for the Chautauqua. And he knew how to raise funds. He knew how to get money from people, from Catholics who were interested in supporting the church and interested in being part of this new movement of the Catholic Chautauqua. So, by 1894, now remember it started in 1892 in New London, Connecticut. They get the land in 1893. By 1894, they've got an administration building built. By 1896, they have an auditorium, a chapel, a central dining hall. They have cottages all over the place because they had a building campaign for cottages. And so by the end of the century, we have this community that has been built up within a few years by this Catholic movement. We have a post office, a laundry, telephone service, telegraph service, a barber shop, a steamboat pier, and so forth. So the grounds of Cliff Haven had been transformed almost into a self-contained little miniature city supporting the Catholic Chautauqua. The enrollment figures by 1903 topped 5,000. And by 1905, they had 800 people, not counting employees, that actually lived in Cliff Haven. So the Catholic summer school was extremely successful. It began to grow. It began to diversify in its activities. It had recreation and other forms of entertainment. It offered steamboat trips on tours across Lake Champlain. It had singing, dancing, card playing. Their special favorite card playing was euchre. I don't understand euchre. My wife is a euchre expert, and she has tried many times to teach me how to play euchre. My wife's Methodist, by the way. So I'm really in good company. All right, don't worry. So he needs a PhD in euchre. Yeah, and apparently euchre is a Methodist thing. I guess I don't know, but I haven't learned it. Okay. When I was in school, we played poker. We didn't know what euchre was. So anyway, that's just a second. But euchre was a big thing. At any rate, it was extremely successful. So successful that it begins to have all sorts of imitators. There was one in Milwaukee. Milwaukee gets a summer school, a Catholic summer school. There was one in Maryland. Emmitsburg, Maryland had one. And there was one in New Orleans. And then one in New Orleans, I think, was particularly clever. It was not the summer school, it was the winter school. It was a Catholic winter school of New Orleans. And they scheduled the starting day on Ash Wednesday every year, the beginning of Lent. And they held the classes during Lent. So they attracted people to the Mardi Gras. They came on Tuesday, they celebrated the Mardi Gras, and then the next day they stuck around and went to the Catholic Chautauqua in New Orleans. So the New Orleans winter school was, again, a copy of the Catholic Chautauqua, which was a copy of the Methodist Chautauqua. So you had this kind of domino effect of these summer schools and one winter school. By the time we get to the turn of the century, it's so well recognized and so well respected that the Commissioner of Education of the United States says that one of the most, this is a quote now from him, one of the most interesting and hopeful developments of higher education in America may be seen in the Catholic summer school in Plattsburgh, New York. And even more impressive, I think, at this point in time, was that a commendation And a note of congratulations came from the Methodist Chautauqua. And I don't know how they do this. You may not do this better than I do, but somehow they got a vote from the people of Chautauqua. And 5,000 people voted to send this commendation and congratulations from the Methodist Chautauqua to Catholic Chautauqua. And I thought, by 1900, I think we're probably, there's kind of a thaw between the relationships between the Catholics and the Methodists. So, now, here's the question. Here's the question. Okay, these things were so successful, all of them. What happened? They're gone. Now, one of them is left. So I began to wonder, what could have happened to this? So I began to look at some of the background and some of the books that have been written about it, and even some of the primary material in copies of the Catholic Review. And it turns out that there's kind of a decline starting with the First World War, after the First World War. We find in 1922, there's a letter in the archives about the fact that the Cliff Haven, Chautauqua, is the only one left. Milwaukee's gone, Maryland's gone, and unfortunately New Orleans is gone too. Okay. So all those are gone. In 1922. By 1930, the Catholic Chautauqua is forced to rent out some of its space to Fordham University as kind of a branch for Fordham because they need more money. By 1941, it's still operating, and they celebrate their 50th anniversary. But their programs are kind of washed out. There's not very much. There's no substance there. So by 1948, the place is gone. It's absolutely gone. It doesn't exist anymore. In fact, some of the buildings were just burned down, gutted and burned down, vanished. And when you went there in the 1970s, it looks like nothing had even been there. In fact, today, it's a neighborhood, but just a kind of a suburban neighborhood. And there's only one sign that the Catholic Chautauqua was even there, which is a plaque like the one we have here at Lakeside. That's it. Now, that doesn't tell us a whole lot. I mean, it tells us what happened, a sequence of events, but it doesn't tell us why. So I decided, okay, it's much more important to know why these things fail, especially because I have this, I'm so invested in this idea of the anti-secular sub-communities that exist to fight the secular movement of the secular city. So, what happened? The answer is, I don't know. I don't know. And I don't know that anybody else knows for sure. Because I couldn't find any explanation. Now, don't get me wrong. That doesn't stop me from making one up. So I made one up. You know, when in doubt in academia, make it up. Okay, so that's what I did. This is what I think happened. I think there were 4 different things that happened. One was, after World War I, there was a resurgence of this anti-Catholic attitude. In fact, there was a resurgence, it was called xenophobia, fear of anything strange, fear of anything different. And Catholics were different. And so were immigrants, but most of the immigrants were Catholics. And so were the union organizers, but most of them were Catholic. So there's kind of a multiplying effect of anti-Catholicism. So if you're a Catholic, you kind of want to lay low, so you don't contribute to things like the Catholic Chautauqua. You don't go to the Catholic Chautauqua. You don't. If you have a cottage there, you decide maybe I'm going to abandon the cottage and not go there anymore. So there's kind of a reaction to that. The second thing I think was part of it was that there was a new wave of competition for places like the Catholic Chautauqua, because now people had radio. They could stay at home and listen to the radio, be entertained that way. They could learn things that way. There was film, movies all of a sudden, movies that could take them away and kind of give them the kind of recreation that they needed. There were photographs now. They could listen to symphonies and bands and so forth without having to actually go anywhere. So all this competition for a place like the Catholic Chautauqua. The third reason, I guess, I would say, is the Depression. After the 1920s, we had the Depression. We reached the depths of unemployment at 25% in 1933. And so people simply aren't traveling. They don't have the money to travel. They don't have the money extra money to spend to contribute to a place like the Catholic Chautauqua. And then on top of that, we have World War II. And with World War II, we have rationing, which means not very much money for gasoline, so people are not traveling that much. You've got movements for buying war bonds and so forth, so money's going someplace else. So by the end of the 1940s, there's not enough funds. They can't get enough income to survive, and so the Catholic Chautauqua shuts down. I thought that was a pretty good theory. Don't you think it's a good theory? It's all, it's like cause, effect, and such and such. The problem is, I began to, in fact, I showed this to a colleague. They heard my theory. So that's great. Right, that's great. Sounds good. Except for one thing. The New York Chautauqua, the Methodist Chautauqua, survived. So why didn't the Catholic Chautauqua? I said, well, I don't know. I have no idea. But it was a good question. So I started looking at what happened with the New York Chautauqua. And I think I built another theory, a theory for the success of the New York Methodist Chautauqua, which explains in an indirect way. I don't have any, this is no direct proof. This is just circumstantial evidence. But it appears to me that what the Methodist Chautauqua had, the Catholic Chautauqua did not have. And what the Methodist Chautauqua had, that the Catholic